I always believed family was forever, until my birthday shattered that illusion. At 34, instead of candles and cake, my father's voice cut through the room like a knife. "You're nothing but a burden." That night, they threw me out of the only home I had ever known. But what if the people meant to protect you were secretly the ones destroying you? I had no idea the betrayal ran deeper than I could imagine. What happened next not only tore apart my family's lies, it forced me to rebuild my life from the ground up. The living room was filled with the faint glow of birthday candles, but nothing felt warm. My parents' eyes, fixed on me across the table, looked less like love and more like judgment. It wasn't just what my father said that cut me. It was the way they stared at me as if I were a stranger in their home. That look stayed with me longer than any words. I had spent most of my adult life believing that sacrifice was proof of love. When my father's business nearly collapsed, I signed away part of my savings to cover his debts. When my mother was hospitalized, I worked double shifts to pay her medical bills, smiling through exhaustion so she wouldn't see me break. Opportunities to move to another city, to take promotions, to live on my own terms. One by one, I let them go. Family first, I told myself. Family was supposed to be my anchor. But looking back, it was the very weight that kept me from swimming. And yet, I wasn't always suspicious. As a child, I used to curl up on my father's lap while he read me bedtime stories. My mother would sing in the kitchen, her voice sweet as honey, while the smell of apple pie filled the house. There was warmth once, or maybe I only clung to the fragments of it. Those memories became the excuse I used to endure every demand, every sacrifice. If they had loved me then, surely they loved me now, right? It wasn't until a month before my birthday that I stumbled across something that made my stomach drop. I had gone online to check my credit score, something I rarely bothered with. Buried in the report was a credit card opened under my name, except I had never applied for it. The transactions were all too familiar. Luxury dinners, shopping sprees, hotel bookings. It didn't take long to realize it was my parents. The very people I thought I was saving had been quietly draining me dry. My chest tightened, but I swallowed it down. Maybe it was a mistake, I told myself. Denial was easier than facing the truth, but the birthday betrayal would rip away every illusion I still held. The signs had always been there. I just didn't want to see them. So let me ask you this. How many of these have you ignored in your own life? The first sign was financial manipulation. It started with small requests. Can you cover the electric bill just this once? Until suddenly it was, we need your signature for a loan. Each time I gave in, thinking it was temporary, each time it became permanent. The second was emotional blackmail. My mother's voice cracking on the phone. If you really loved us, you'd help us. I can still hear the catch in her throat. She even cried once, telling me, "You're the only one who hasn't disappointed us." And I believed her, only to watch her dry her tears within seconds and ask for money again. Then came the gaslighting. If I ever questioned them, they twisted it back on me. "You're imagining things," my father would say. "We've done everything for you. Why are you so ungrateful?" Soon I began to question my own memory, my own sanity. Isolation was another tactic. Friends would invite me out, but my parents always had a way of pulling me back. Sudden emergencies, endless phone calls, guilt-soaked comments like, What kind of daughter leaves her parents alone on a weekend? Slowly, my world shrank until it revolved only around them. Control of information was subtler, but just as poisonous. They kept secrets, medical bills they wouldn't show me, debts they claimed weren't my concern. And yet somehow I always ended up paying. The sixth sign was secrecy in communication. They whispered behind closed doors, hushed their voices when I walked into a room. Once I found a message on my mother's phone from my father. Don't tell her about the loan until after her birthday. And the final sign was betrayal masked as love. They praised me when they needed something and cut me down when they didn't. It was a cycle I grew numb to, thinking it was normal. But the worst moment came when I accidentally saw a text on my father's phone. It wasn't meant for me, it was meant for my mother. She won't know until it's too late. Keep the statements hidden. My hands shook as I put the phone back on the counter. They weren't just careless with my trust, they were plotting against me. That night, lying awake, I asked myself the question that still haunts me. Was I crazy for still wanting their love? After everything, a part of me still longed for approval, still yearned to believe that beneath the cruelty, my parents loved me. That longing was the chain they wrapped around me, one I didn't yet know how to break. The signs were there all along, but the real shock came on my birthday. The dining room was crowded with relatives that night, laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses. For a brief moment, I thought maybe this birthday would be different. Maybe they would finally see me as more than a wallet. But the illusion shattered when my father stood, raised his glass, and said the words that cut deeper than any knife. You're nothing but a burden. The laughter stopped. The air went cold. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, waiting for my reaction. I felt my cheeks burn as if I'd been slapped. My mother sat beside him, silent, her face unreadable, as if she had rehearsed this moment with him. My legs trembled under the table. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but my throat locked shut. When the last guest left, my father made his judgment final. Pack your things, he said, his voice low but sharp. We don't need you here anymore. He didn't even look at me when he said it. The house that had once been my sanctuary was now a prison spitting me out. As I dragged my suitcase toward the door, my mother leaned close, her voice a whisper in the dark. We never needed you. We just needed your money. Then she stepped back, expressionless, as if she hadn't just broken me in half. Outside, the rain poured down in heavy sheets. I sat on the porch steps, drenched, suitcase by my side, and tried to remember the last time I had felt truly loved. A memory surfaced unbidden, me at 5 years old, feverish and weak, being carried in my father's arms to bed. His chest was warm, his hand steady on my back. I remembered thinking, he'll always protect me. That child's faith was still buried in me, even now. It made the betrayal unbearable. Through the rain, I noticed an envelope had fallen from the dining table near the door. Curiosity pulled me toward it. My fingers trembled as I opened it, expecting perhaps a bill or a receipt. Instead, I found a copy of an old will, my parents' will. My name was nowhere on it. Years of sacrifice, erased in black ink. My chest tightened, but before I could collapse under the weight of it, something inside me began to shift. I was shaking, rage, grief, and clarity colliding all at once. For years I had played the role of dutiful daughter, pouring my life into a bottomless pit. Now, staring at that will, I realized the truth. I had been nothing more than a tool. A deeper search revealed something worse. Buried in a pile of unopened letters in my room was a loan agreement, tens of thousands of dollars, signed in my name. My parents had forged my consent and tied me to a debt I never took. It was the kind of betrayal that could have destroyed my entire future. Instead, it lit a fire in me. For the first time, I stopped crying and started thinking. I replayed every conversation, every lie, every manipulation, and something hardened inside me. I couldn't undo the past, but I could control what came next. My hands still trembled, but my thoughts grew sharper, like glass shards aligning into a blade. I began documenting everything. I bought a small recorder and slipped it into my pocket when I went back into the house to retrieve the last of my belongings. That night, I caught my parents' voices through the crack in the door. "We'll sell the house soon," my father said. "She doesn't even know she paid it off for us." My mother laughed softly. "By the time she finds out, it'll be too late." Hearing their words made my stomach turn, but it also gave me evidence, proof of what they were. I pressed the recorder in my pocket tighter, my heart pounding, knowing I finally had something they couldn't twist. I walked away from that house with no money, no home, and no family. But I carried something more powerful: the truth. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought the rain and the night would swallow me whole. But if they thought I'd disappear quietly, they didn't know me at all. I spent the next morning in the public library, hunched over a laptop with shaking hands. I had logged into every financial portal I could access, determined to know just how deep the rot went. Line after line of transactions appeared on my screen. Thousands of dollars in charges I'd never authorized. Luxury handbags, electronics, endless dinners at restaurants I'd never stepped foot in. My name was on every statement, my credit tied to their indulgence. Then I found it, a loan account I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through the details. $50,000, signed in my name, payments months overdue. My throat tightened and I grabbed the edge of the desk, steadying myself. This wasn't just exploitation anymore, it was identity theft. My parents hadn't only used me, they had tried to ruin me. I forwarded the documents to a private email and kept digging. Buried in an archive folder, I discovered an email from my father to my mother. Just one sentence, but enough to turn my blood to ice. "She'll never know until it's too late." The walls of the library seemed to close in on me. I pressed the laptop shut and stumbled outside, breathing in sharp, cold air as if I'd been underwater. The betrayal felt suffocating, but it also fueled a sharper resolve. They had underestimated me. For the first time, I saw a path forward. I would build my case, piece by piece, until they could never deny what they had done. Still, the weight of it was too much to carry alone. That week, I sat in a therapist's office for the first time in years. The sterile white walls made me nervous, but when the therapist asked gently, "Why are you here?" the dam broke. I sobbed until I could barely breathe. The words slipped out between gasps. My own parents betrayed me. Hearing it aloud made it real. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't imagining things. They had betrayed me. That single acknowledgement, painful as it was, became the first step in reclaiming myself. But the most damning proof wasn't financial, it was personal. I started reaching out to people I trusted. My old college friend Hannah let me crash on her couch and handed me coffee in the mornings, like it was an act of salvation. A financial advisor, referred by Hannah's colleague, helped me track the paper trail. A lawyer explained what counted as evidence and what I needed to protect myself legally. And every week I returned to therapy, piecing myself back together. It wasn't just professionals I leaned on. Slowly, my circle widened. To my shock, an aunt who had always stayed silent at family gatherings called me one evening. Her voice was shaky but resolute. "Rachel, I need to tell you something," she said. "Your parents planned this for years. They cut you out of the will long ago." I didn't speak up because I was afraid, but I can't stay silent anymore. Her words struck like lightning. I had suspected, but hearing it confirmed from someone inside the family made my knees weak. The betrayal wasn't spontaneous cruelty, it was premeditated. One night, rifling through an old box of my mother's belongings I had salvaged, I found a notebook. The handwriting was hers. Scrawled on the inside cover were notes about asset transfers and removing Rachel's name. I stared at the words until they blurred with tears. My mother hadn't just played along with my father's schemes, she had authored them. I pressed the notebook to my chest, shaking but strangely relieved. Each revelation hurt, but each piece of evidence gave me strength. The lies that had trapped me for years were unraveling, and for the first time, the truth was on my side. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a lawyer, a financial advisor, a therapist, and friends who refused to let me sink. I even had family members willing to tell the truth. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. With my allies ready, I prepared to strike where it hurt most. The opportunity arrived sooner than I expected. My parents loved to parade their power during holidays, and Thanksgiving was their stage. The house brimmed with relatives, long tables covered in roasted turkey, glasses clinking with wine. I sat quietly in the corner, my stomach tight, recorder in my bag, evidence backed up in multiple files. I was ready. My father rose to his feet, chest puffed, glass in hand. "Family," he boomed, "is everything. We've worked hard to build what we have, and Rachel," he gestured toward me, his voice dripping with false generosity. "We've carried her for far too long." Laughter rippled through the room, but I noticed the cracks in some faces, an aunt's frown, a cousin's downcast eyes. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. My parents attempted to pay for the catered meal with their credit card. The waiter returned, awkward, whispering that the card had been declined. My father barked, "Run it again." The waiter tried, declined. My mother pulled another card from her purse, declined. Their performance of authority collapsed in real time. Every eye turned to them. Then slowly, some shifted to me. A silent question hung in the air. "Did you do this?" My pulse raced, my hands trembling beneath the table. For a second, I nearly confessed, just to end the tension. But instead, I steadied my breath and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the loudest weapon. As my parents stammered, trying to maintain composure, I sat frozen, outwardly calm but burning inside. This was the revenge I had envisioned. Not violent, not chaotic, but undeniable. Their own arrogance had set the stage. I had simply pulled the strings. But their retaliation was nastier than I could have imagined. Within days, whispers spread. My parents launched a smear campaign, painting me as unstable, dangerous. "She's sick," they told relatives. "She's always been unwell." Soon, rumors reached my workplace. They hinted I was mentally unstable, incapable of responsibility. The sting was worse than I expected. To them, destroying my reputation was easier than facing the truth. Then came the twist that nearly broke me. They hired someone to forge medical records, fake psychiatric notes, prescriptions I'd never taken, diagnoses I'd never received. The documents painted me as delusional, paranoid, even violent. I stared at the copies in disbelief, rage mixing with despair. How far were they willing to go? One morning the storm broke wider. A local newspaper ran a story. Daughter accused of stealing from parents. My name was in bold letters, my reputation gutted in public. I wanted to curl up and disappear. For 2 days, I barely left Hannah's couch. My chest felt heavy, breath shallow, the thought looping endlessly. Maybe they've already won. But Hannah sat beside me, squeezing my hand. "Rachel, you have the truth. Use it." Those words pulled me back. I opened my laptop, hands still trembling, and uploaded the recordings. My parents plotting to sell the house I paid for. The bank statements showing loans in my name. The old will that erased me from inheritance. Every file, every document, I released them all. Slowly, the tide shifted. Relatives who once ignored me now called in shock. "Rachel, we didn't know," one cousin whispered. Even strangers online rallied behind me, disgusted by the forged records and the smear campaign. For the first time, the narrative wasn't controlled by my parents. It was mine. When the storm cleared, truth became undeniable. The fallout from my revelations moved faster than I could have imagined. What began as whispers on social media soon became official inquiries. Subpoenas were issued, and investigators combed through the financial wreckage my parents had left behind. For years, I thought no one would believe me, but now their empire of lies was unraveling under the weight of cold evidence. The hearings were brutal. My father sat stiff in his suit, his arrogance replaced by sweat beading across his forehead. My mother clutched her purse, eyes darting like a trapped animal. They denied everything at first, of course, claimed I was fabricating evidence, that I had turned against them out of spite. But then came the twist I never saw coming. I wasn't the only one. An uncle I hadn't spoken to in years stepped forward with documents of his own, money my father had borrowed and never repaid. A family friend testified that my parents had conned them into co-signing loans that ended in default. Even a neighbor produced proof of manipulation, small but damning. One by one, the stories piled up until it was clear this wasn't just my battle. My parents had been weaving webs of deceit for decades. The judge listened, impassive, until finally delivering the blow. They were found guilty of fraud and financial abuse. But the most devastating moment wasn't legal, it was personal. The judge looked at them, voice steady, and ordered, "You will issue a formal apology, publicly, to your daughter and to those you've harmed." The courtroom went silent. My parents' faces twisted in rage, but they had no choice. In front of the very community they once tried to impress, they were forced to admit their lies. The words were hollow, their tone dripping with resentment, but hearing them stripped of pride was a justice I never expected to witness. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but I felt no triumph. Standing on the courthouse steps, I realized there was no joy in watching the people who raised me fall. My chest was heavy, not with victory, but with grief. I hadn't just lost parents, I had lost the illusion of ever being loved by them. For the first time, I allowed myself to mourn. But true justice wasn't about watching them fall. It was about rising myself. The months that followed were quiet compared to the storm, but they were no less transformative. Without the constant pull of my parents' demands, I found space to breathe. Therapy sessions shifted from survival to healing. I stopped asking why me and started asking what now. Then came an unexpected invitation. A nonprofit organization that supported survivors of financial abuse reached out. They had read my story and wanted me to speak at an event. At first, I hesitated. Sharing everything publicly again felt raw, almost unbearable. But then I thought about the countless nights I had felt alone, convinced no one else could understand. If my story could save even one person from that silence, it was worth it. On stage, my voice trembled at first, but as I spoke, I saw heads nodding, tears glistening in strangers' eyes. Afterward, people approached me, men, women, young, old, all with stories of betrayal that mirrored mine. For the first time, I felt my pain transform into power. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a handwritten letter from someone I didn't know. "Rachel, I'm your cousin from your mother's side. I've followed your story, and I want you to know you're not alone." I held the letter to my chest, tears slipping down my cheeks. For so long, I had believed I was abandoned by family, and maybe in one way I was. But in another, I was building a new one, piece by piece, connection by connection. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning to thrive. My shoulders felt lighter, my heart steadier, my reflection in the mirror no longer haunted but hopeful. But my story wasn't ending. It was only beginning. The first step was silence. I changed my number, deleted old email accounts, and blocked every path my parents had used to reach me. Then I packed my things and moved 2 states away, to a city where no one knew my name or my story, unless I chose to tell it. The act of leaving felt like severing an invisible cord, one that had bound me for years. But silence did not mean peace. My parents tried to claw their way back. They called through relatives, sent letters through family friends, even left messages with old neighbors. "They just want to talk," one cousin said softly on the phone. My heart twisted, but my answer was steady. No. Each refusal was a small rebellion, a step in reclaiming the life that had once been stolen from me. In the quiet of my new apartment, I discovered a peace I had never known. The space was small, just a single bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a view of a bustling street below. But it was mine. One evening, after unpacking the last of my boxes, I boiled water and made a cup of tea. I sat by the window, steam rising into the lamplight. And for the first time in years, I felt my shoulders unclench. The world outside rushed on, but inside there was stillness. It wasn't grand, it wasn't dramatic, but it was freedom. For the first time, I was free to choose me. The months that followed were filled with rebuilding. I poured my energy into work, launching a small consulting firm with the help of connections I had built through speaking events. At first, it was just me and a laptop, hunched over a desk until late into the night. But slowly, clients came, then referrals, then growth. What began as survival turned into success. Yet the most unexpected twist came not from business, but from love. I met Daniel at a networking event, a financial analyst with kind eyes and a disarming laugh. Unlike others before him, he didn't ask about my family or try to dig into scars I wasn't ready to share. He listened when I spoke, respected silence when I needed it, and never made me feel small for the weight I carried. With him, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a partner. Still, life had one more surprise for me. Months after stabilizing my company, an email arrived. I had been awarded a scholarship for an MBA program I had once abandoned because my parents needed me at home. My hands trembled as I read the acceptance letter. The education I had given up years ago was no longer lost. It was waiting for me. That night, I sat again with a cup of tea, this time not alone. Daniel leaned beside me, and I let myself smile without fear. The weight of betrayal had not vanished, but it no longer defined me. What defined me now was choice. I had been discarded, humiliated, and stripped of illusions. But out of that wreckage, I built something stronger. Boundaries, independence, and hope. My scars did not make me weak. They made me unbreakable. They thought they broke me. But in truth, they built my freedom.